Hello and welcome to Microsoft Hates Greg. My name is Greg Deckler, and today we're going to be talking about waffle charts. So I saw a couple posts from Carlos Barboza, and if you're not following Carlos on LinkedIn, you should be. You're going to miss a lot of great stuff if you're not. And he did a couple posts on these waffle charts, and I thought they looked really cool. So I figured I'd take a shot at trying to create these waffle charts in Power BI Desktop. And then also I reached out to Nick Deborah, who is my go-to as far as visuals and all that sort of stuff. And if you don't know Nick, he wrote Practical Charts, the book Practical Charts and More Practical Charts. If you don't have these books, you're also missing out big time. So I'll be sharing kind of Nick's insights into waffle charts after we go through and I show you how I built these in Power BI Desktop. And you may be wondering, like, well, Greg, why did you go through and build these in Power BI Desktop? Carlos provides all this material and stuff like that. Yeah, I don't do things that way. I learned by doing it myself. So what it's kind of like when somebody drives you to a place. They could drive you to that place like 12 times. You have no idea how to get there, but if you drive there yourself, right? Then you always know how to get to that place. That's how I kind of work. So yeah, it's gonna be I don't know if this is how Carlos built his waffle charts, but this is how I'm gonna build my waffle charts in Power BI Desktop. So, all right, so here we go. Let's get into it. And so here, I built out this scatter. This is using a scatter plot, so a bubble chart, and so you can see, right. This is my first attempt to build it out, and then I also did it as a matrix. So this is using a matrix visual. Works kind of the same way, right? You can see, and then I improved it, right? Like, it's not so it shows like the things are left, and so then I did it again as far as this, and this one, basically shows instead of these being white essentially and then not present when they're not selected, it actually shows kind of a ghost of it, right? So there you have it. So how do you build these things? Right, it's not that hard. Well, the matrix one's a little hard, but it all starts with this table. So the way that I did my table is I just did a generate series. Let's zoom in on this. So I did a generate series from 1 to 10, right? I did column and row, and I did a cross join between them. So cross join basically, so they it does a Cartesian product between the two, is what a cross join does. So basically, I'll have 1 to 10 for columns, and then each the 1 for the column will have 1 to 10 row, the 2 for the column will have 1 to 10 row, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the first step. And then what I did was then I created this rank column as kind of an index um, using the rank function. So basically, rank dense you order by the column and then by the row, both in ascending order. Okay, so what that's going to give you is a rank from 1 to 100 in this case, right? So if I sort descending, there's 100, 99, 98, 97. And it's important to rank by the column and then the row versus the row and then the column. Because if you think about what's going on in this scatter chart, right? This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, right? So you want to rank the column first and then by the row, right? So that's how that works. So that's really the basis of it, and that gets your scatter plot working. Because what you can do, scatter plot's really simple. You just put your row and you put the row in the x-axis, and you put your column in the y-axis, and then you're pretty much done at that point. You just have to set your markers up, so you can change the shape of your markers, right? You can do squares, you could do diamonds. It's kind of crazy, but I would say probably stick to like this, and because when you get to like things like that, it just looks weird, right? But that's really kind of really all you have to do in terms of, let's get this back to being circles again. Now, the one problem that I had with the scatter plot, which is why I decided to try to do it in the matrix as well, is this, right? So you have to the size in the markers, you have to really adjust. So if you shrink this down, right, then you have to shrink your size multiplier down. And even if you have it at maximum, you can increase this to where the size where it just doesn't look as good. There's large gaps between these things, which I don't like that, right? So you have to kind of mess around with it a little bit in terms of, get the gapping right and so it looks good or whatever. So I decided to try it with a matrix instead. Oh, and let's see. I should actually cover. So there is a one other trick to this, which is the marker color. So you go to the color and you see it. I've got a conditional format here. Conditional format is based in this case on measure two. So what I did was I basically grabbed the max and the min of the slicer value. Because in this case, I actually have this slicer is actually a separate table, okay, to get the conditional formatting to work in that. So that I can have these other, right? Otherwise, these wouldn't show up if I based it upon rank. So initially what I did in this one is you can see column and row, and that's all that I have, right? And then this is based upon my rank in my table. So, but what happens though is if you want these other things to show up, then you will basically, I have a separate slicer from this slicer table, which is just really simple, right? Generate series 1 to 100. And then now I can then create a measure that'll say, do the conditional formatting on, what color to display. And that is this. So again, so I grab my min and my max from my slicer. I grab my maximum rank, right, for my table. And then I do a results. I just it's an if statement, right? If it falls within the range, then it displays the 118DFF is the blue, and then the D4EAFF is the light blue, right? So you just determine what you want to display um, in here. So that's how that is done. The matrix works basically the same way. Um, and again, you can do things like crazy things like, like this and select partial, from that, or you can do it the normal way, right? But it is kind of interesting in terms of how much configuration it takes to get this matrix to do. Now, the bad thing about the matrix, right? You don't have the same problem with the scaling, but it's always the same scale. So you have that issue. So let's start from scratch with a matrix and see if we can get it to look like this. And it is not easy. I'll be perfectly frank about that. So the first thing we want to do is we want to get rid of all of this stuff, right? We want to get rid of all this stuff around the total and all that sort of stuff. So we're going to turn off the totals, right? Get rid of that. And then we want to get rid of these headers and stuff. So let's go to the column headers, and we're going to set those to our background color. And this is where it gets weird, in my opinion. As you can see, I've got colors selected, but these don't change, right? And you're like, well, what's going on with that? Well, the problem is that this is the default setting for the slicer, and it's like, oh, it's not working, but you can change other things like set this down to 8 or really big, right? And those all of a sudden those work, right? And I guess that's one way that we could scale these squares is by increasing the size of our header and rows, and we could get these to be bigger if we wanted to. But yeah, so it doesn't work, and so it's a bug, right? And I know there's probably some Microsoft Sims out there like, oh no, Greg, it's not a bug, it's by design, so that you don't get yourself in trouble because the banded rows, the word vomit, right, from these Microsoft Sims about how it's not a bug. Well, let me tell you, it's a bug, okay? Because one, if this isn't going to do anything, it should be grayed out. So bug, okay, that's step one to being a bug. Step two is it makes no sense that just because these are banded rows, I could pick a color like red, it would show perfectly fine for both of these. So why don't I have the option to like at least, I should have the option, if I pick something that's going to cause a problem with this, right? I'm going to see it and I could change it. You shouldn't just disable me from controlling the color of this damn thing because I have banded rows on, right? Or two, give me two colors. Hey, this is the text color for, the banded row one, and this is the text color for the alternate, right? So three ways that this is a bug, okay? Now, to get around it, right, we have to go up here to layout and style, let's go to none, and now suddenly it works. But of course, when I set it to none, it overrode my column header, so I get to go back and set that back. Thank you very much, Microsoft. Okay, so the next step is, let's see, I need to get rid of these things. How I can't, I have to remember how I got rid of these things. Auto size width, and we'll come back to that one, I guess. Let's see, maybe it's grid, horizontal grid on, turn the grid on. Oh, maybe it's borders. I have to set the borders to white, get rid of those. Now, these, right, you see these right here. So we have to set the horizontal grid to white color and then set the vertical grid to the white color. So now all that's left is to handle the coloring. Okay, so what we have to do here is we have to go down to over here and the values, and we set the conditional formatting, set the background color to the field value, and in this case it's measure, and say okay, right? And then so this measure is the same concept, right? So it's min max, they get the rank, it falls in the range, then it's in this case it's red or it's gray, right? Okay, so we set the conditional formatting of that. And then we also have to set the conditional formatting of the font color, the same thing there. And then if you notice it's not quite working right the same way, right? It's the reverse. So we have to go up to here, we have to go to here, to go here, sort by. Right now I think it's sorting by sum of rank. I need to sort it by column. Bam. So there we go. So now that's how we get the matrix to work. So definitely a lot more work than the scatter plot, but you don't run into the scaling problems with the matrix versus the scatter plot. And if I want to, I think if I want to increase, let's increase this to 24, right? And I could increase this to 24. And probably apparently have to do, not sure why it doesn't scale the same way. There we go. So then I could scale it this way, right? I could make it bigger. It's kind of annoying to me. I don't know why this last row is, why that one is larger than the rest. In terms of me have to turn auto scaling off or something like that. It is kind of annoying that it takes up this much space to get it to be big, I guess you could say. But anyway, that is how it's done. Delete that. And so yeah, so now okay, so now let me share some of Nick's feedback because I don't like bothering Nick, but he's always super gracious when I ask him questions. So I basically was building this out. I'm like, I'm smart enough now about visuals, after reading Nick's books to understand that just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. So I was like, I wonder what Nick has to say about waffle charts. So here's what he has to say. I hit him up on LinkedIn, and Nick is awesome, and he's always gracious enough to answer my questions and things like that when I hit him up on out of the blue on stuff. So I really appreciate Nick. And again, if you don't have Nick's books, you're missing out big time. But he's basically saying, okay, their strength is in showing proportions of the total when the total consists of relatively small number, a few hundred or less, right, of distinct items. Showing the number of seats held by each party in parliament, number of people out of 100 to get a Z's. Like waffle chart, reminds people that the total consists of some number of distinct items, right? The weakness is that other chart types like pie charts, stack bar charts, etc., make it a bit easier to estimate and compare portions of the total. And those chart types work for totals that consist of billions or dozens, huge numbers. They work well for huge numbers as well as small numbers. And he's like, does that help? And yes, it helps absolutely. Like, I don't know where Nick's brain, his brain is amazing when it comes to visuals. Like I kind of had some thoughts around waffle charts, but I could have never have expressed it as succinctly as what Nick did. And he just blurts this stuff out, and it's like it's exactly right. Like where I've seen waffle charts, right, are things like especially around the U.S. election that just happened. Thank God that's over. Um, and they would show like control of the Senate or control of the Congress, and they'd show it with basically waffle charts. Um, and but and what I noticed about it though was that like waffle charts, they weren't it wasn't really that good as far as especially Congress, where there's like four or 500 seats in Congress. Like they'd always show it with, and I'd always, it's like, okay, the waffle chart looks kind of cool, but I can't really gain any information about it. I don't know where the tipping point is to where one party controls the Congress or the other party controls the Congress. So the waffle chart is kind of like eye candy, but above it, they'd always have like, oh, the Democrats have this number, the Republicans have this number, and you need this number to to be have control of the Congress, right? So even though so the waffle chart looked nice, but it didn't really convey a lot of information, I don't think. I was I would always like refer to the numbers at the top, to basically understand, okay, who's going to control Congress essentially. So I don't know whether they have a huge amount of utility or not. They definitely kind of look cool. There's no doubt about that, right? Right. But in terms of whether you should be using them in your reports or not, I don't know. That's a good question or whatever. But maybe just to spice them up or something a little bit, they'd be nice. So, all right. Well, that's all I had for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.